we can talk about the 2008 incident, you've mentioned in an article that you actually wrote in the Washington Post, you mentioned that it wasn't an accident what happened to you. It was business as usual. And if you could go back to that day, what would you have had them do differently?
Well, I now know everything that happened. I mean, I really know tick-tock what happened leading up to that day, how the agencies work. We've done over 150 hours of depositions, and I really have a detailed understanding of what went wrong. It wasn't that my mother-in-law screamed. It wasn't that they heard her scream or anything they said. They actually didn't hear her scream. They didn't hear what they said. Through that window, they saw that she saw them. And that in and of itself, according to their policy, created a danger which compelled them to go dynamic. That's a crazy policy. Because they also, they went around the long way, past all the open windows. They didn't come to the front door. So that policy really speaks, it speaks to the fact that these are officers with MP5 submachine guns, and they don't know the rules regarding constitutional rights surrounding the knock and announce principle. They don't understand what risk is, and they haven't been trained. And that lack of training is clearly evident in things that they said. It wasn't that they wanted to do something bad. They just didn't know any better. A lot of people said this is just about the dogs, and there's no question it made it worse. But not only should they have not shot the dogs, they shouldn't have been in our house in that way. They should have knocked and let us deal with the dogs in an appropriate manner. But there was no policy in place that applied that. And so as a result, the police and those Deputy Darris truly believed that it was perfectly fine just to execute an animal. And and the way it happened is Peyton really never got a chance to turn around even. They just came in and started firing right away. And the police officers, the sheriff deputies involved, were pretty poorly trained. The first shooter, he dropped out of community college. He was hired right after 9/11 by the police department. He actually been fired by a security company because he the big vans that they drive, the armored vehicles. He crashed one of them. So he was fired by a security company moving, for the armored vehicles. Then he was immediately hired by the police, actually the sheriff's department. But the guy who shot Chase, actually one of the other deputies said Chase, after seeing his brother shot, was just running in circles, and he actually came into the kitchen, confronted a guy who was actually the second shooter, who saw Chase stop, turn around, run into another room, run away from him. He then went into the other room where he saw the third shooter who killed him. He stopped. He then turned around again to run in the other direction, where he shot him from behind with an MP5 submachine gun. Once to disable him, and a second time as a kill shot. It was, once the bullets start flying, untrained guys will get their testosterone running, and bad things happen. It was really, it was hard to find, other than shooting a human, anything they did right that day. What happened to us was a fluke. We never have learned why our address turned up on that box. And we weren't the only one. There were six boxes just on, I think, the FedEx driver who was coming to my house, his route, and there was another FedEx driver that was going down Riggs Road. I know that address in Adelphi, that they arrested him as well. They said they arrested him in both cases. He was not. Neither FedEx driver was charged. But the fact is that our name ended up on this box, and we don't know why. But it happened. But I'm pretty sure that night, if I wasn't mayor, if I wasn't white, I probably spent that night in jail. Elected officials don't want to criticize the police because they sort of feel like police is a separate operation with which they have nothing, very little to do. That's a police matter. And so the result is, people who may have been done wrong are often treated as the victim. They sort of immediately say, well, let's talk about their conduct. And the voice of the police can drown out the voice of people who are victimized. And it's very difficult to stand up against that system. And the problem is when you have elected officials like Jack Johnson, like Michael Jackson, like our former county council members, Sam Dean or Tony Knotts, who are decent people in their own right, but they were unwilling to have a single public hearing not just on my case, but on Ronnie White. I mean, there were no legislative oversight hearings on police misconduct over the last 2.5 years. They simply didn't exist. No one was asking questions other than the media, quite frankly. When you have that system, the police quickly learn that they can get away with anything. And good people in a bad system do bad things.
One of the most recent changes, Mark McGaugh is now the new chief of police.
Well, he's the interim chief of police.
Well, and he was the commander of the narcotics division when they did the raid on your house. Can I ask you what you think of him?
I would oppose making that appointment permanent. I look forward to the day that we put in place a new police chief at the county level who can bring about the changes that I think are necessary.
How have you and your wife coped with the loss of your dogs?
Well, we have
two new doggies.
We do. We actually, that's Marshall right in front of you on the ottoman. We adopted, I think, 18 days after the incident. When you count it down, he was lab rescue. We had met him at a lab fair. Xander, who I think has gone on a chair in the other room, he was on his last day at the county shelter.
Wow.
And he was rescued by the Prince George's SPCA Humane Society. They knew we were looking for a black lab, and he's the two of them are wonderful. They don't replace Peyton and Chase, but they certainly have been a huge part in our healing process. Also, we have established a fund called the Peyton and Chase Fund for Animal Causes. PeytonandChase.org if you want to go there.
Yeah.
And it's basically a fund, kind of a memorial fund as part of the Prince George's County Community Foundation.